Hey, what's going on? Ed Fletcher here, and this lighting is weird, but I'm in my backyard, and I wanted to address what was going on with George Floyd, Minneapolis, and the riots, because it is consuming the city, and I know that I feel like my feed is flooded with this, but I also feel that maybe not all of my friends and people in my network one, either know how I feel, or B, have black friends in their network that may articulate these things. So for those who don't know a lot about me, I grew up in Orangevale, outside of Sacramento. My parents are from the South. I've worked at the Sacramento Bee for a long time, and for a good portion of the Stephon Clark rallies, I was the guy that was holding my iPhone and taking video of the protests. And so you spend a lot of times near the protest, but not in the protest, and that's a position I really I guess I enjoyed, or felt like that was a good role for me, because I'm not the kind of guy that would go to a riot, or for the most part go to a lot of protests. I like to make my impact through journalism, and that was how I felt like I made my contribution. But that didn't mean that there weren't times I felt like that the system wasn't hearing the black people, or people that are being oppressed. And if you look at the pattern of what's happened with violence against black people, and even if we just look in the span of the Black Lives Matter movement, as technology has progressed, we see more and more video evidence of the things that black people had alleged for a long time, that the police were treating them unfairly and beating us and putting us in jail or arresting us because we're black, and that there were bad outcomes for black people in the U.S. justice system. So as we increase the technology, we see more and more of this, but the system doesn't seem to change. And as we've progressed, you see these evidence from Trayvon Martin on forward, where black people are victims, feel like they're victims of police violence, or outcomes in the system where they're being shot and killed and treated improperly, and nothing seems to weighed in their favor. The courts, they fail in the courts, or they don't prosecute them, or something along the criminal justice system breaks down, in that the cops that in their mind perpetrated this don't go to jail or don't see consequences. And the examples of that not being true are few and far between. And as we saw this escalation of this during the Obama years, I felt like, as a observer of these protests, that there was at least a sense among the crowd that maybe the federal government will step in and do something, that maybe there's another level of government that they can protest this to, and that may answer their call, and that they don't need to escalate any further. And it's always been sort of a cat and mouse game. If 30 people hold signs and protest, how much impact does it make? If 60 people do it, how much impact does it make? But if 120 people block down I-5, well, then of course you've got cameras from here to there, and you've, in theory, made a bigger impact. And that's what Black Lives Matter was doing in Sacramento. They're trying to make a bigger impact by blocking roads, or causing an impact by impacting white people's lives, and then that makes more of the news, and hopefully they think their cause will be advanced. Blocking the arena caused a big inconvenience to white people and got them more press. So the organizers there's always fractions with them that want to push it further and say if we do more impact to them, then they will see the cause more, and maybe they will see justice our way. And I'm not arguing that that works, but from the ground level, sometimes it does seem like it impacts the speed at which the government makes a statement or does a response. And now we fast forward past 2016, we've got Trump in the White House, and there is no sense that there is a referee to refer these things to. So I can imagine being in that crowd. Nobody in that crowd had a sense that the federal government or the FBI is going to swoop in and do justice for them. They just said that day that there was credible evidence that it might go the other way. So they feel like, how do we get heard? We get heard by burning down the house of the master, and that will get attention, and that will get, perhaps people will see justice our way, or let them know how angry we are, because it's a pattern and it keeps happening. And at a certain point, some people feel like you've got to do more. And this, of course, was the struggle with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And Martin Luther King, of course, wanted to go the nonviolent route and to try to figure out ways to get attention with sit-ins and lunch counter protests and bus protests and economic protests. Malcolm X, of course, wanted to go the other way and punch him in the face and see if that gets a reaction out of them. Stepping away from race for a second, if you look at some of the economic figures that we don't typically see, we see the poor getting poorer, the rich getting richer, and typically in a society, that's when things break. So I think there's economic factors and there's race factors, and then there's the Trump factor fueling this unrest. Certainly no sense from people in the crowd that the federal government's going to weigh in and see justice their way. I hope that in this situation, the facts are so egregious that this officer is arrested and justice is done and the rioting quells. But I fear that the next situation, people will feel like they need to take to the streets too to get justice. So I think we need to find a large-scale criminal justice reform that allows black and brown people to feel like they're being heard and that their voices matter and they're part of this government, and that the police are there to protect and serve them, not to put their boot on their throat and to kill them. So, you know, this is emblematic of the fear that people live in communities of color and outside communities of color, because I look a lot like George Floyd. Stan Gilmore's watching. Stan Gilmore looks a lot like George Floyd. And they could have been called, and I could have had my life smushed out of me because some asshole wanted to be funny, or because he could. All right, I think I've said enough. Thank you for watching this. I hope we can all take a pause and think about what we can do to live up to the ideals of this country, that we're all created equal, and that justice works for everybody. And think about in the local elections and national elections and everything in between what you can do to make America work again and to work like we thought it worked. Because black people, brown people have been suffering a long time. Poor people are suffering. And this is one example that was brought to you in high definition, but it's certainly not the only example, and we need to not forget that. But please, let's all act responsibly. There's no need to riot but I certainly understand what is happening there on the ground. All right. Thanks, everybody. Signing off.